In early autumn of 9 CE, in the wooded hills and marsh edges of what is now Lower Saxony, Roman power suffered a shock that still echoes through European history. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest matters because it changed how Rome thought about its northern frontier. At the time, the Roman Empire had pushed deep into Germanic territory, building roads, camps, and alliances. The landscape seemed open to conquest, yet control depended on fragile trust and constant military presence. Rome did not rule this region as a settled province, and local leaders balanced cooperation with resistance. Many communities were tied together by kinship, rivalry, and the pressure of Roman demands for troops, taxes, and obedience. On the Roman side, Publius Quinctilius Varus governed with administrative confidence. But little battlefield luck. Opposing him was Arminius, a Germanic noble who understood Roman methods and carried the burden of divided loyalties. Varus had to maintain order across a vast and difficult frontier, while Arminius navigated alliances that could unravel quickly. Both men were under pressure, but only one would turn that pressure into an ambush. The Roman army was disciplined and heavily equipped, with infantry, cavalry, engineers, and long supply lines. Its strength came from organization, but that same organization could become a weakness in broken terrain. Germanic fighters relied on mobility, local knowledge, and lighter equipment suited to woods and marshes. They did not need to match Rome in open battle if they could stretch the column and strike at its edges. Logistics shaped everything. A Roman force on the move needed wagons, animals, engineers, and a steady rhythm of marching, all of which became harder to protect as the weather worsened and the route narrowed. Morale also mattered. Roman troops expected order and control, while many Germanic fighters were defending their homes and local power, making the coming struggle as psychological as it was military. The route into the Teutoburg region likely followed a difficult corridor of forest, hills, and wet ground. Ancient roads here were not broad highways, but vulnerable paths that could trap a long column. Rain and wind turned the terrain against the Romans, softening the ground and limiting movement. In such conditions, a marching army could lose the neat spacing that made it formidable in open country. The battlefield was not a single flat field, but a long, broken stretch of forested ground. That mattered because visibility was poor, formations were hard to maintain, and every bend could hide danger. Arminius and his allies appear to have planned for delay, confusion, and attrition rather than a quick clash. Their advantage was time, terrain, and the ability to choose when pressure became deadly. Roman confidence rested on the assumption that local allies would remain dependable. That assumption was fatal because the enemy did not need to defeat Rome everywhere, only at the moment the column was most exposed. The opening phase likely began with harassment from the woods and along the road edges. Rather than a single dramatic charge, the battle seems to have unfolded as repeated shocks against a stretched and disordered force. Roman soldiers tried to regroup, build temporary defenses, and protect the wagons and wounded animals that slowed everything down. But each pause gave the attackers more time to control the ground around them. The pressure point came when the column could no longer move as one body. Once separated, the Romans lost the flexibility that had carried them through many earlier campaigns. Germanic fighters likely struck where the line was weakest, using the forest to mask movement and the weather to deepen confusion. Their aim was not spectacle, but collapse through relentless pressure. At the decisive moment, the terrain itself became a weapon. Narrow passage, slick ground, and poor visibility made it nearly impossible for Roman discipline to recover before the next attack arrived. What followed was not a clean battlefield maneuver, but a breakdown of command and movement. Units that could have fought effectively in open order were trapped in a struggle they could not fully control. Some Roman groups may have tried to cut their way out or build defensive positions overnight. Yet the overall situation worsened as exhaustion, weather, and isolation eroded any chance of recovery. The Roman command failed to restore order, and the army's cohesion gave way. Once that happened, the battle shifted from a contest of tactics to a collapse of survival and retreat. Arminius's coalition did not need to occupy every inch of ground afterward. The victory came from denying Rome a stable foothold and proving that imperial expansion could be reversed. The immediate aftermath was grim for Rome, with survivors scattered and the frontier shaken. News of the defeat would have traveled slowly, but its consequences were felt quickly in military planning. In Rome, the loss became a warning about overextension and the limits of control beyond the Rhine. The empire did not collapse, but it became more cautious about permanent conquest east of the river. In the years that followed, Roman commanders returned to the region in punitive campaigns and frontier consolidation. The empire learned to defend, negotiate, and punish, rather than simply advance. The battle also reshaped memory. Later, writers turned it into a symbol of disaster, resistance, and the unpredictable power of local terrain against imperial ambition. Historians still debate the exact location, the precise sequence of events, and how much of the later narrative was shaped by Roman authors. The broad outline is clear, but many details remain qualified. There is also caution around the word Teutoburg Forest itself, since the ancient battlefield was not preserved as a single obvious site. The name became traditional even as the geography stayed debated. Modern archaeology has added texture through finds from roads, camps, and battlefield debris, but it cannot answer every question. Material evidence helps, yet it rarely speaks in full sentences. The place today is quieter than the ancient accounts suggest, with woods, paths, and memorial landscapes inviting reflection rather than certainty. Visitors encounter a region shaped by memory as much as by history. That contrast is part of the battle's enduring power. A remote landscape became a turning point because human trust, weather, terrain, and command all converged at the wrong moment. Teutoburg Forest is remembered not because it was the largest battle of the ancient world, but because it revealed how vulnerable even a great empire could be. Its lesson is about limits, not legend. The Roman Empire endured after the defeat, yet its northern policy changed in lasting ways. Frontier defense became more important, and the dream of easy expansion beyond the Rhine faded. For the Germanic coalition, victory brought prestige, but not a permanent unified state. Local power remained fragmented, and success on the battlefield did not erase regional rivalries. The story survives because it sits at the meeting point of empire and landscape. In that forested corridor, the Roman machine met conditions it could not fully master.